Welcome to Secure Money Mindset, the ultimate podcast for financial planning tips and strategies. Our episodes are designed to be concise and to the point, lasting no more than 30 minutes. Each episode features seasoned advisors from Secure Planning Group or an outside financial specialist discussing crucial issues and providing actions to consider when addressing your top financial concerns. We value honesty and transparency, meaning we present both the good and the bad news in a clear and concise manner. Our goal is to provide you with reliable insights and practical guidance. Be sure to hit the follow button to stay up to date with our latest episodes. For more information, please visit our website at securepg.net. Let's dive into this week's episode of Secure Money Mindset.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Secure Money Mindset podcast. With us today, we have Lauren Kays from the Bogar Hipp Law Offices. She is an estate attorney, so we're here to talk with you today about some of the basics of estate planning and kind of go through a few specific questions we have for Lauren that kind of pertain to the masses with a focus on some of the things that are kind of top of mind in the world of estate planning with different regulation changes and things like that. So Lauren, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
So Lauren's a great partner for Secure Planning Group. Whenever we have somebody who has needs when it comes to estate planning or basic family planning, wealth transfer stuff, we connect them with professionals like Lauren who, again, great partners to Secure Planning Group, are aligned with kind of the quality of service we provide to our clients, but they are true experts in their space. So when we're talking about comprehensive financial planning, estate planning comes up often, but by nature, we are not estate planners ourselves or an estate attorney. So we really leverage the expertise of someone like Lauren, and they do a great job for our clients. So we wanted to just kind of open up with the basics of kind of how you frame what's most important about setting up an estate plan.
Sure. So it's important for everyone to have an estate plan, especially if you have assets and you spend your lifetime building and growing your asset profile. If you have a family, it's especially important, but it's also important if you don't have a family. Say you're a business owner. There are many considerations that come into play. But for someone who has assets, an estate plan is a must. And it's not just about having a last will and testament. It's about knowing and understanding the implications of the business and real estate interests you own and the other assets you own that you work with your financial planner to grow during your lifetime. It's understanding what the legal implications of that ownership is during your lifetime and also after you pass away. Your estate plan is not just considering who inherits after you pass away, but who's in charge of the management of your estate. Kind of akin to who's in charge of the management of your financial affairs during your lifetime. Say if you're not able to manage your own affairs, or even if you're working with a trusted financial planner, as you should be, to make the most of your financial investments during your lifetime.
I think one of the things you mentioned immediately in your answer is that estate planning is something that is really for everyone, right?
Correct.
And one of the common misconceptions about what we do as a financial advisor, and especially about what you guys do, is that it's for the wealthy, right? It's people ask me all the time, like, what are your minimums? Or would I even be a good fit for what you do? And I feel like that's probably really common in your space as well, as people come to you and maybe they're not at a certain asset level. So they think, what would I need estate planning for?
Sure.
And can you maybe just touch on the fact that, like you said, everyone needs it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a situation where maybe it's a young person and you're just starting to grow your asset profile, maybe you're on the brink of considering investing or purchasing your first home. You have a vehicle, you have a bank account, and probably the majority of your wealth might be in the retirement you're growing with your financial planner. But it is also important to have a plan for what happens not only when you pass away, but for a scenario where you're not able to manage your own affairs. So in the context of you passing away, it's true, maybe your estate is not huge, so to speak, but you still want to make sure it's you who are in control of naming the beneficiaries you wish to inherit, even if it is a small amount. And it's also important that your estate planning attorney has an open line of communication with your financial planner. The set of assets that your planner manages, you will work with this planner to name and designate a primary and contingent beneficiaries on those assets. It's important for your estate planning attorney to know who those named beneficiaries are. Maybe one of those beneficiaries, if they're a minor child or disabled individual, how you protect that person's inheritance is determined by the trust language you set forth in your will itself. So in that context and scenario, it's a collaborative effort between your estate planning attorney and your financial planner. The will is also critically important for designating an executor who is going to manage your affairs after you pass away. And there are a lot of other things you can do with your will with respect to designating gifts of certain things to certain individuals. You can even go as far as indicating your preferences with respect to funeral burial. If you choose to go that direction, you certainly don't have to. But the will will work with the plan that you're putting in place with your financial planner.
Yeah, and it's all really important things to bring up. Two items that came up in your response, maybe drill into a little further. You're kind of alluding to it indirectly, where it's the purpose or need for these types of plans being in place. People's mind automatically gravitates towards death, right? Or the passing. If you're incapable of making decisions, that doesn't necessarily mean you've passed, right? So being incapacitated is another situation that you need to have a plan in place for. Is that fair? That's kind of what you were alluding to?
Absolutely. So unexpected life and health events happen all the time, and it's important to be prepared for those. They are typically handled in a document called a power of attorney, a financial power of attorney. There's also the counterpart to that in the healthcare setting is a healthcare power of attorney. And it's along the lines of your succession plan for who will inherit from you is critically important, but your succession plan for who will manage your affairs during your lifetime and after your death is also critically important. And you want to name individuals you trust implicitly in these roles as your agent in your financial power of attorney, your healthcare power of attorney, as well as those individuals you designate in your will to fill the roles of the executor, trustee, and perhaps guardian if you have a minor child.
Yeah, and you're bringing up some of the nuanced topics of really why, the specific examples of why estate planning is needed, right? A disabled child or special needs planning, things like that, where so often people are so worried about the here and now because it's your livelihood, right? So say if you have a child with special needs or if you have an adult child who needs some form of assisted living, right? Your life is so revolved around helping them here and now that it's so easy for you to remove the thought of, well, what if I'm not here to do it, right?
Sure.
And in the absence of an estate plan, you're really leaving a lot undecided, right? Which, again, it's up to you whether or not that's important enough to build a plan. But it's really the call to action that we present to the folks that we recommend speaking with you, right? It's, hey, everything's intact today, but it sounds like it's very reliant on you. So if you aren't here or if you aren't capable of making decisions, who's going to look after those loved ones, right?
Sure.
And that's a really basic prompt that we all kind of throw out there, but we see it in real time all the time on the back end, right? It's
Absolutely.
when in the absence of an estate plan, we have clients or loved ones of clients that we get referred to that, hey, can you help them clean up the mess after the fact, right?
Sure.
And
we get those calls too. Like, we get it.
yeah, and I feel bad because I wouldn't want to bring up the specific examples that you have because I'm sure that it can be, you know what I mean? It's morbid, right? People don't want to talk about it,
Yeah.
right? But it is just reiterates the importance of why it needs to be there. The other piece that I was thinking about when you were referencing having the executor is we always say you can't make financial decisions from the grave, right? And again, it's a really morbid comment to make, but it makes it real to the listeners. It's again like you could have all the intentions in the world and know that your heirs have the best intent. Once you're not there to play referee, then it becomes effectively like a messy boxing match, right? Where if you're remarried and your kids have a stepmother or stepfather, what do they get along while you're here might be different when you're not here, right?
Absolutely.
And if you don't have explicit language expressing what your wishes are, then again, it does become this he said, she said, or hey, whoever is in charge effectively makes the decision for you.
Sure. And it is true that there are a default set of laws that controls who will inherit from you if you pass, say, without a will. And there may be certain assets you have on which you've named beneficiaries, and those assets will flow to those named beneficiaries. But there are so many missing pieces if you go about your planning that way that open your estate up to vulnerabilities, conflict, and extra time and cost in resolving those vulnerabilities and inevitable conflicts that you open up your heirs to, perhaps engaging in unnecessary disputes over who could be in control when perhaps there are 3 to 4 people who have equal footing under the law to, say, petition for certain roles. And it really should be you who makes the decision about how will your estate be administered and who will inherit those assets that pass under your will. But also, too, considering, going back to the hypothetical of the young person, yeah, there may not be much that passes under the will, but having that conversation where you connect your estate planning attorney early on with your financial planner, we can brainstorm ways to guide decisions that might be in your best interest now that, yes, they may evolve over time, but they're setting the groundwork and the framework for preservation of your assets and protection of your assets during your lifetime and after your passing. I'll take this moment to bring up the concept of life insurance as an estate planning tool. That's not something I would put in place in my capacity as your estate planning attorney, but we could brainstorm it as a possible solution for someone whose estate maybe wouldn't yield liquidity upon their passing, or maybe they don't have much cash in the bank, but it can be a really effective estate planning tool for many reasons. So it's getting your team in place early on in the process that as your life circumstances change, perhaps the future holds marriage and children. This team is behind you every step of the way, counseling you for ultimate success during your lifetime and after you pass away. And also those in-between moments that none of us can predict, those interruptions of health emergencies, or even in the context of the financial power of attorney, it may not be limited to a circumstance where you have diminished capacity on account of a health event. Perhaps you're traveling and there's an onset, hopefully this wouldn't happen, another pandemic.
So we talked about, you mentioned life insurance, right? And the two ways estate planning, or the two focuses of estate planning, generally speaking, protection, preservation.
Correct.
Right. So two of the words that have been mentioned repeatedly, protection, preservation. Having a will makes sure that your intentions are protected, right? It doesn't necessarily protect your assets, so to speak.
Of course.
When it comes to probate and things like that. It's not a given, right? So going to preservation, shifting from protection to preservation, that's when we kind of talk about things like life insurance, things like trust planning, where you can build a true estate plan around either the preservation or protection of your assets.
Sure.
And as you mentioned, life insurance is one way to either create liquidity and or offset the estate tax liability that might be associated with your estate. So that's kind of the shifting gears, if you will. The first 5 minutes we spoke was, hey, this is why estate planning is good for everyone. This is, I guess, kind of the segue into when you have a more complicated estate, or if you have more specific goals and objectives as the individual investor, that's when working with the team, the CPA, the estate attorney, and your financial planner can all work together and say, hey, this is not just what lowers your tax bill today. This is not just what lowers your tax bill when you go to pass. This marries all of your objectives and they're all aligned. The piece to drive home about the life insurance component is really, in my mind, like the same topic of, or the same theme of estate planning, where everyone needs it technically, right? It's what person identifies themselves as somebody who needs it, right? And in what way do they need it, so to speak? And so, like, when we think about the context of the estate plan, so basic estate planning versus doing a comprehensive plan and using trusts and things like that, same thing kind of applies for life insurance. If you want to make sure that, hey, when I pass, my family is not scrounging together $12,000 to $15,000 for a funeral, at the very minimum, have enough life insurance to cover your final expenses, right? Burial, funeral, things like that. So that's the very baseline. Even if you're a 30-year-old who's not married, no kids, if you have basic life insurance that covers your final expenses, you're at least making sure that your family doesn't stress about those things. Going a step further, if you have, like you're saying, assets to protect. In an example that is real for my family, my parents saved their whole life to purchase a beach home, right? Their lifetime goal. I'm a financial advisor. I'm their financial advisor. In passing a year ago, they said, if you or your brother sell this beach house after we pass, we will haunt you from the grave. And I said, hold on. I said, stop right there. I'll schedule you a meeting, right? Or you need to build this into your trust language.
Absolutely.
And my parents never thought they needed a trust. Now all of a sudden they had a reason to build a trust. And it was purely for the purpose of having language in there of saying, when we pass, we want this asset to be retained in the family.
Yep.
And the only way it can be removed is to purchase another beach house that will be used for the family. So again, it's just a specific example for our family that it doesn't necessarily have to be to protect the assets from probate or something like that. It could be so you can have instructions for your family members of how to manage an asset.
Absolutely.
So that's, again, a very specific example for us, but I bring it up because I'm sure you have hundreds of those examples where a business owner knows that one of his sons or daughters is heavily involved. Their other 2 or 3 siblings are not. So assuming that this person who is heavily involved is going to have the best interests of the other 3 siblings and not have some type of negative connotation towards the amount of effort he has to put in versus them, you're not being realistic.
Sure.
So if you don't have specific language built into your estate plan, you can almost guarantee from the grave you will be looking down on your kids arguing over assets.
Sure.
Right? And again, I can't make assumptions, but
yeah,
it's wrong to assume otherwise.
Sure. Yeah. And on the note of, you gave the hypothetical of a family that had one child maybe better suited to handle the management aspects. In families that own small businesses or even medium or large size businesses, there's often a parallel comparison. And when you're drafting your estate plan and you're covering those scenarios, you're making sure the right children are in the right roles. You also want to make sure your business organization documents work with your estate planning documents. That's really important. And that goes for any business owner, anyone who owns any form of ownership interest in a company. it's important to check in with those org documents to understand the implications of what you own, what happens to those interests. Is there any limiting language or direction in the business org doc that we need to know about in order to work in what you wish to happen with those business interests if we're not otherwise limited in your last will and testament? Everything has to work together.
I think the topic that comes to mind when you're explaining that is having an expert who knows the right questions to ask. Sure. Because if they're not working with you who knows the right questions to ask or where to look in those documents, then it's easy to just brush past it.
Sure.
And then wait for it to become an issue.
And that example of a business owner would apply to someone who owns a portfolio of real estate. It also applies, and this is a little bit of a going another direction, but say you are entering a second marriage or even a first marriage and you decide to put into place, because it's in your best interest, a marital agreement, a prenup or a postnup. That also has to work with your estate planning document. So again, the thought of putting an estate plan in place, it's not isolated or insular. It's part of the entire structure of how you own your assets now, how they're titled, what you have going on with your financial planner, and also bringing in the perspective and advice of your CPA. That's really important during your lifetime to guide your decisions here and now, and also to understand what the impact of your decisions now versus the plan you put in place after you pass away, what that means from a tax perspective.
Yeah, as you're talking again, I'm like thinking of examples or analogies in my head, and it's like having the person who like laid all the piping in your house not working with the plumber, right? It's like if the plumber is installing all the things that you're using the pipes for, has no clue what that person did, then it's going to be a mess, right? Or there's going to be errors or leaks. And those leaks, when it comes to estate planning, it could be you addressed a need or an objective without all the facts. Therefore, you thought that it was addressed. And then essentially, like you're saying, it could be completely offset by something else.
Absolutely.
And then all of the money that you spent on building an estate plan or working with an attorney is really all for nothing because you didn't give them all the information that was needed, right? It all really kind of circles back to the importance of working with experts, one, but two, experts that are aligned and not necessarily that one, your interest is at like the forefront, right? Where if you have multiple parties giving you advice and they're not working alongside each other or aren't aligned, it spins you in multiple directions, and it almost has you play them against each other, where it sounds like the CPA is asking questions just to challenge the estate attorney, or the estate attorney is just asking questions to challenge what the financial planner is doing, rather than what the whole reason we're all working for you in the first place is to get you to where you want to be.
Sure.
So those are all components where it's like, I don't claim to be an estate attorney. If I wanted to, I would have pursued that, right? Versus I'm not trying to sit here and answer the questions I would go to Lauren and ask, right? So when I'm in the meeting with our clients, we can talk at a high level to some of these things. But as soon as a client goes into the weeds, so to speak, then it's an immediate call to action of let me loop Lauren in. Let's schedule a joint meeting where technically we're both sitting on the same side as the client because we're hearing the client out, what their objectives are. But then we're each playing our own role where Lauren will give you advice and say, this is why we're doing it. And as your advisor, we're supposed to help you understand how it fits into the overall plan, and maybe push back on Lauren in certain areas, right? Where, hey, if you're looking at a purely academic and you don't know all these other facts,
Sorry.
That makes sense. He forgot to mention this, and it's like, okay, now we can keep the client honest as well.
Sure. Yeah.
In terms of like basic estate planning, I'm trying to go through the checklist in my mind. One of the things we didn't touch on that prior to us recording, we mentioned was how things are a moving target, right? So like as a professional, we're required to perform continuing education. We're required to kind of stay up to date, right? On all things, rules, regulations, best practices. things like estate planning rules, they change over time with regulation. So something like the sunsetting of your lifetime exemption limits, right? So knowing that, hey,
And maybe just explain what those exemptions we're talking about. The gift, estate, and generation skipping transfer tax exemptions.
perfect. So if you could maybe just allude a little bit, like 30-second definition of kind of what those limitations or what those limits are and why they're there.
Sure.
And then what we mean by the fact that they could change or evolve.
Sure. So we are in the last year of a pretty generous exemption for the highest earning of households for the transfer tax implications on gift, estate tax, federal estate tax. Pennsylvania inheritance tax is a different animal altogether, and the generation skipping transfer tax implications. So right now for an individual, they are at about 13.61, the exemption, million. And for married couples, we're at 27.22 million. So these exemptions will roll back or sunset at the end of this year, unless Congress acts. None of us have a crystal ball as to what exactly will happen. With that in mind, with the sunset coming soon, we're already nearly to April, it's important for those households who may be impacted by the sunset to be prepared for that. The rollback will take the exemption down to 7 million, which there's a lot of in between the 7 million and the exemption limits currently in place. So sitting down, making a plan for the sunset, sitting down with your estate planning attorney, your financial planner, your CPA, really important. What are your options? Lifetime gifting may be a good one. And it's all about analyzing where you are today, where you could be when and if these sunset provisions fall into place.
Yeah, and I think that when people just Google these types of things, right, a lot is left out there for interpretation.
Sure.
And again, we keep harping on this theme. Working with the professional removes that language barrier, if you will, right? You're not forced to understand a language in the Google search. It's, look, this is what it means for you. And when you hear a lofty limit like 13.6 million, right? A lot of people assume it does not apply to them. But if you're a business owner or real estate investor, you can very quickly meet those limits, right? So at the very minimum, working with somebody like us to help you verify, hey, you're not at that limit yet.
Good point.
The other piece is one thing you mentioned in passing earlier was you build an estate plan and we're hoping we grow your estate, right? So if you build your estate plan year 1, year 10, chances are that estate plan's out of date, right? Or at least needs to be adjusted in one way or another.
Sure.
And we hope that's because your estate has grown. So if your estate today is estimated to be 6 to 9 million and you're compounding that at a healthy rate, you're going to reach those limits pretty quick.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you think you're below the threshold today, say if the sunsetting does take place, goes from 13.6 down to 7, then right then and there, you're more than likely closer to the limit than you thought.
Right, where it wasn't on the forefront.
Right.
While those exemptions do apply, it's there's a huge segment of the population that will be impacted.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's not to make it so that you think that this doesn't apply to you, but when we think about the ultra wealthy, right, it's really hard for somebody who's amassed $20 to $30 million net worth to assume that they're going to compound their net worth at the same rate that they did to get there. And chances are those people are the best at doing it, right?
Sure.
So if you're at a $10 million net worth today and you're only 55 years old, if you're doing the right things, we should have you at a $30 to $40 million net worth by the time you hopefully live a long, healthy life. So some of these things you might not think apply to you. If we're doing the right things, hopefully they do.
Sure.
And so ultra wealthy folks often think like, oh, it's fine, I'll have the money to solve the problem when I get there. But it's if you can have a plan in place and we can effectively limit the amount of taxes that get taken off the top, why would you not have a plan to do so?
Sure.
But you need to answer those questions for you as the end investor, right? Like, what are your goals? How much do you want to leave behind for your family? How much do you want to leave behind for philanthropic interests? Things like that, where giving those examples those are the nuances that make each one of us unique in terms of what we're going to want out of an estate plan. So these are all really important topics, and I'm more than anything just trying to share with the audience like food for thought of reasons, all the different ways that estate planning does apply to different folks. And I hope that is at least a healthy exercise for everyone who's listening. Like, you may not have thought some of these more advanced planning topics apply to you, but if you care anything about what's going to happen to your assets after you pass, then you have to have a plan.
And even during your lifetime, coming back to those powers of attorney, the simple effect of having this document in place, which shouldn't cost too much to have you put in place, can save your surviving loved ones or your loved ones in a scenario where you've had a vehicle accident or something. Significant time saving, stress saving. It's just such a simple thing to put in place that can have really positive, productive ramifications that save your loved ones a lot of time and stress.
Yeah, and we kind of alluded to it when we said everyone just assumes this is for the wealthy. One of the underlying assumptions there is that this is an expensive, exercise. I want to debunk that more than anything, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
it does not cost you thousands and thousands of dollars to set up basic estate planning, right? So do not, you can, again, if you were to do a Google search, one thing that's really important to note is working with an individual versus using some type of automated service. I cannot even put into words how important it is, right?
Especially in Pennsylvania, where we do have an applicable inheritance tax. It's really important to keep that in mind as you're making your estate plan. And this applies to everyone, not the highest earners. Right. So we can sit down and explain what that tax is for various individuals who may end up inheriting from you. And there will be individuals who will be subject to that tax by the default laws as well. So we can navigate, the ways to perhaps plan with that in mind to minimize the inheritance tax burden on your beneficiary, your intended beneficiaries. And you mentioned that this doesn't cost thousands of dollars to put in place, and that's true, and it shouldn't. However, it can be that costly when you don't put the simple plan in place. If it's vulnerable to disputes, to the wrong people being in charge of management, mismanagement alone can be super detrimental to your legacy. It can undo everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's impossible to put a price tag on the opportunity cost.
Correct.
It's impossible because it really is unlimited. Right. In terms of the liability, so to speak. The main reason I wanted to bring up cost is one of the examples of how we first got connected, actually, through a different business networking interest. You had actually presented an idea, and I have regurgitated it a few times since because I thought it was a great idea. And your idea was gifting estate planning, right? And it sounds, I'll explain it, but in the way that Lauren framed it was if you're a thoughtful gifter, this was right around the holidays, and if the way I'll frame it to the audience is if you're a grandparent or if you're a new grandparent, so if you have a 30-year-old son or daughter who's having their first child, it's hard to motivate that 30-year-old to make these decisions, right? Mm-hmm. But it's important to do. So if you're a grandparent, a new grandparent, gifting somebody the fees for estate planning, it can be a reasonable gift from a dollar amount perspective, but Absolutely. It's a thoughtful gift, right?
Truly.
So if you have a family member who you know has been procrastinating this type of thing, that's an example that Lauren had given me in the past that I really like. And I don't think that it's as applicable for what I do, because it's everyone needs an estate plan. I think everyone needs a financial planner, but not everyone knows it, right? Everyone needs a will. And if you can gift a family member the fees that would cover the drafting of a will, I think that's a really meaningful gift.
Absolutely.
And
that
was random.
It may end up being a gift to them too, because it relieves the stress of not having that plan in place. Especially young parents, critically important. They put a will in place designating the guardian. That is your decision as to who will raise your children if something happens to you. And that is what will be legally and lawfully recognized. Yes, naming a godparent is a step, but that's not going to be legally recognized. We've certainly presented that as evidence in a guardianship petition in court, but that is the last proceeding you want to have happen when your family suffered an incredible loss and it's emotional and stressful and just a very difficult time. So think of it like a way to ensure that in a worst case scenario, things will go smoothly. You're protecting and preserving not only your assets, but you're putting a plan in place for who will care for your minor children. And that's really important.
Yeah. And when you're thinking about assets versus loved ones, I mean, you can't even envision them in the same plane, right? Even verbalizing it feels uncomfortable. But I think it's a really emotional call to action that's important. And it's almost a good kind of thought to kind of end on is that is really why you need to have a plan in place.
Absolutely.
Your loved ones, right? You care so much for them while you're here and able. We're talking about all the scenarios where it's out of your control.
Absolutely.
You cannot choose when you leave this planet. You cannot choose when your last day will be. And those are all reasons why the plan has to be in place today, not a month from now, not when you have your second child, not when you're 35, not when you make a certain amount of money, not when you have a certain amount of assets. It should have been in place. Therefore, if it's not in place today, you need to schedule time with somebody, right? And so unless you feel like there was something that we really just kind of totally overstepped or didn't kind of drill into further, I just wanted to make sure that we summarize kind of everything you kind of had in mind.
I think we got it.
Perfect. Well, I really do appreciate your time, Lauren, and it was really helpful, and we hope that you guys found it to be helpful as well. And if you have any questions for Lauren, we'll leave her contact information in the information below the video, and we hope to see you on the next one.
Thank you.